So I pose a question. What is REST? It's supposed to be the voice from the science dude on MyPython. I don't think anybody got that. It's okay.
A duck.
A duck! And who are you, sir, that is so wise in the ways of science? So does anybody know what REST is? Yeah.
REST is a kind of like an application layer that allows your server to interact based on your URLs being passed in to the browser. Any other thoughts?
Representational state transfer.
Oh, we got a Wikipedia among us. Anybody else?
It's not so.
Yes.
You're all wrong. No one knows what REST is. So yeah, it's defined as representational state transfer, but it doesn't necessarily just apply to HTTP. REST is kind of like it's kind of like an idea of a way to structure things so that you can get to them without having to know what the state is. So a database interaction could be considered RESTful, but we most commonly refer to REST when we're talking about HTTP APIs, and commonly you think of it with JSON. So in a small amount of words, do stuff consistently and don't rely on stored state to do it. So if you rely on cookies to get the data, or if you rely on local storage to get the data, or something else that's storing the state, then it's not RESTful. That being said, you might use cookies to store authentication details in order to access a RESTful API. But the idea being that in order to get to the state that you're in, or the state that the data needs to be observed at, you don't have to know the instantaneous state. So it's really similar to the CRUD philosophy. Does everybody know CRUD? Ever worked with a database? So you've got create, read, update, destroy. And then there's this other idea that we use in HTTP, which is that of replace. So when you do a post, like a form post, that is, in theory, supposed to be that you're creating a resource. When you do a get, you're getting a resource without modifying it, unless you're using like a query parameter, in which case you're getting the resource, but only a limited section of the resource. A patch would be an update, although commonly right now people use post for updates because Internet Explorer didn't support the other verbs aside from get and post until like recently or something, where recently is probably like 7 years ago, but since Internet Explorer 6 has been around for like 20 years or whatever. Like, anyway, you get it. And the truth of the matter is that no one ever heard of REST until Ruby on Rails made it cool. Because before then, people just used PHP and they made really crappy APIs and they made no sense, and sometimes when you got a resource it'd be camel case and other times it'd be underscore. And then Ruby on Rails came along and was like, hey, let's not do this now, guys. And everybody was like, cool. And then like REST gained a big following, and then the REST heads were like, it was cool before Ruby, and then everybody else was just like, no, it wasn't. So if you want to learn about REST, you go into the Ruby community, more so than any other one. And if you imagine these to be like URLs, so like /users, then some ID. This is kind of the common convention of how the Rails world kind of established what REST means, and it follows the true REST ideology for the most part. So the nifty thing, this is kind of pretty intuitive, I hope. So you get users, it would return an array of users. Maybe you have a query parameter, and it would give you the same array, but just less of it, right? That make sense? No?
Yes.
Yes? Verbal response? Murmur? Okay, I'll take that as I'm still eating pizza. And then if you specify the ID, you get back just one item. So here's where the theory can be a little confusing if you just go with the way lots of applications are done as opposed to the way that they should be done. So the theory is that when you post to users, you would give some data that describes a user. And that is going to create a user that has never existed before. And in theory, the only way that you would ever post to /users/ID would be if you were creating a user with an ID that you knew beforehand. But the way this commonly gets used currently in many, many applications is to do either a replace or an update. So what you should be doing is either a put or a patch. And just to stop real quick, does everybody know what I'm referring to when I say git, post, put, patch, delete?
You should explain it.
All right, so let me go to explaining that. Okay, so when your web browser makes a request, or you're using jQuery and you make the request, or if you're using Spotify and it makes a web request, or if you're using basically anything that connects to the internet, it pretty much all goes over HTTP. So pretty much every application you use that connects to something online, it sends a header that's in this format. It has a verb that's like get, or put, or post, patch, delete, and then there's some other ones that are specific to certain applications, like there's an options, there's a head. Microsoft uses one for their like file share stuff, like something about like an Office share drive. I don't remember what it is, but one of Microsoft's applications has a custom verb that's particularly for the use of their folder share or SharePoint or something. I don't know what it's called. Not Microsoft have it, but I know that they have their own thing. And then it'll say the protocol. And the reason that this first line is here is because basically every protocol on the internet follows this format. This header is called a MIME header. And when the internet began, people just started using it because it was really simple to understand. And it caught on. So like your email messages kind of look like this. Your web requests kind of look like this. Basically everything outside of the government looks like this. The government, every single company just creates their own protocol without any regard to existing standards whatsoever. Yeah. So the last company I worked for was SpotRF, and we followed standards, but we worked with a lot of other companies and integrated and stuff, and nobody else followed standards. So yeah, it's a sore point for me. Anyway, so then you've got this host field, and that says, like, what am I trying to get? So this would be example.com or google.com or localhost or whatever. And then sometimes you have a port on there if you're not trying to access port 80, which is where the web is normally hosted. And then user agent, so this will, no matter what it is, if it's a browser that a user uses, like to go to google.com, it's going to always show you Mozilla as like the first thing it says, dating back to the old 1990s days when Netscape was around and people were trying to do the right thing back then. They were blocking Internet Explorer because it wasn't Mozilla, and so they just blocked it and said, well, we don't serve our pages to your kind. And you know, so they were trying to do the right thing, but then Microsoft started putting Mozilla in their user agents so that Internet Explorer could get to those pages that they were saying like, we don't take your kind here. And then like Opera does it, and so everybody does it. They all say Mozilla, but then they'll say WebKit or they'll say Chrome or whatever inside of like this thing. But it'll if it's like Spotify, if you open up Spotify and Wireshark, I'm pretty sure you'll see like it'll say user agent Spotify 1.1 or 2.7 or whatever. And same thing with tons of other applications. If you open up Wireshark and look at the traffic, you'll see that it'll have a user agent that either identifies it as a browser or some other application. And then there's just a bunch of headers that talk about like the connection, if this is gzipped, if the connection should be closed immediately or kept alive, all the negotiation stuff, what language it's in, if it's actually a web browser. So, the verb stuff is here, and whenever you type a URL into your browser, that's always a get, every time, in the face. And whenever you have a form that doesn't have any JavaScript and you hit submit, that form is always a post. But for the last several years, when you use jQuery or any other type of, even if you use the native request, whatever, you can specify what you want the verb to be. And in most browsers, you can specify any verb you want. You can put pizza in there. But it doesn't make sense to put that unless you've got like a pizza protocol server. There actually is a standard for coffee pot protocol, so if you ever want to do home automation with a coffee pot, the standard's already defined. And if you are ever connecting to what you think is a website and you get back a response saying it's like 419, I'm a teapot, that lets you know that it's actually a teapot, not a coffee pot, and you cannot issue the brew verb to that server device. That's true. It's in the standard. Look it up. Yeah, here we go. RFC 2324, Hypertext Coffee Pot Control Protocol. Not lying. Okay, so obviously if you're talking to a coffee pot, you want to use the brew verb, but if you're doing REST, you want to use get, post, put, patch, delete. But don't use post for everything because REST heads and Rails heads and lots of other people who care about clean, organized REST will hate you. So put is supposed to replace. So if you want to entirely replace some data, like we have this user Bob who's ID 0, and we want to replace his content entirely with these two keys, then the other keys that were associated with that object would get deleted. So if this user had 10 keys, a name, a phone number, a beeper, and age, and favorite kind of coffee, and then you put this to it, you should design your server and your client-side application to expect that that put would replace the content entirely, not to perform an update or not create it. Patch is what should be used for patching a single field. So if you just wanted to update user ID 0's phone number, then you could send a patch and give the phone number like so. Now, you can think of this in the broader sense as the design methodology or ideology. It's like with a database, sometimes you want to update some keys, but not all of them. And likewise, it would make sense that if you're designing a database API, that you would have a method that would replace the key, which is normally just called set. Set normally functions as the create and the replace. So you normally have a get, set, and then perhaps a merge. where the merge would be doing what patch does. You put in some keys, and then it gets the keys from the database, merges in the keys that you wanted to update, and then sets it again. So, and then delete if you want to destroy an object entirely or an entire collection, because you could conceivably delete /users and delete all of the users in your database. I don't know why you'd want to do that. Maybe you decide to start afresh. And then in Rails, at least, you see a lot of stuff like this, where the resources kind of are compounded. So you could do a get to users /subid /bookmarks /subid, and that would give you a particular bookmark that that particular user has saved. But in my opinion, that could be both good and bad, because then you have two ways of accessing the same thing, because you could probably also get /bookmark /id just as well as you could get /users /id /bookmark /id. So it depends on how you believe in your heart about logical organization of things.
Well, can you say that point again?
The reason that I don't like this idea,
Yeah.
so because I can get /users /id /bookmarks /id, right? So say the bookmark has the ID of 712, right? Well, I could just get /bookmarks /id 712.
So basically, you're fine with the second line there?
So I think this one right here, I think this is pretty decent, because then you know you're getting bookmarks that are just associated with that user. So that makes sense to me, because it's a logical grouping that can't be done this way. Like the way that it would have to be done this way would be like /bookmarks and then !, user equals. And I don't think that that is as clean of an API as I think this is. But I think that when you get to the point that you're doing stuff like this, maybe it's going a little too far. But you'll see it out there in the wild, and it's clean. I mean, this doesn't look ugly. You can look at it and you can understand what's going on. So I don't think it's bad.
I think I've gotten down the rabbit hole of like screwing around with URLs too much. I mean, like, so long as you understand the main point to like have a resource called users and a resource called bookmarks, like I wouldn't stress too much about the URL schemes at this point, because you can go forever down purism and get in debates online about the right way to do this. And that was what you were saying about before arguing about it.
Yeah.
But it's not worth it. Like, just keep working it.
Yeah. And so what I'm trying to explain here is just like the very basics of what it means when people say REST. I mean, REST is kind of a word a little bit like PHP, right? Like, people say I need PHP, and they don't really care if it's Ruby or if it's JavaScript or if it's Python. They just want a backend and a database. And all of that gets encompassed in the phrase PHP. And same thing with REST. Like, people say they want a RESTful API. What they mean is they want something that's clean and simple, that hands them JSON, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with REST when people use it in a business sense.
I think what this gentleman said earlier, when they say REST, what they mean is they don't want SOAP.
Yes, that's certainly true. And if they say SOAP, what they probably mean is they want REST, but it's a PHP problem.
Well, I think it helps to understand the opposite, which is remote procedure call, right? It's like you have a function on your server, and that's what SOAP was. It was like you can call functions in your local code, or you can call them on the server. And we all know how functions work. Like, you call them and you get outputs. But functions can have weird side effects. Like, if you say get all users, you don't know whether that's like creating the user cache. Like, you don't know, right? But the idea behind REST was that you have this like standardized thing, and you have certain guarantees about certain parts of it. Like, you can call the get one over and over and over again, and it's not supposed to like update something on the server when you get it.
Right. And a common failing in that particular category is your unsubscribe emails. A lot of times you get like a little email at the bottom that says unsubscribe. It gives you a link which performs a get, but actually does the action of a post because it's updating data, and that's considered not RESTful. However, to a lot of people, it's considered excusable because you want the process to be quick and seamless, and you don't want the user to have to take more actions than necessary. And so there's a little bit of forgiveness in some people's eyes when you use a get to delete data or to modify data because you just don't have another option. However, I would like really quickly, did this thing just turn off? Or can I not hear myself?
It turns out when you turn.
Really?
So you need to be like this way.
So it's direction, okay. So I just want to show exactly what I was talking about using jQuery.
I really want to troll AJ right now.
Yeah, so
Not hard. You know, jQuery will swallow your errors.
it will sometimes, but not times that I can necessarily prove.
Okay, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that jQuery is loaded. Yes, it is. And let's see if I can remember their API. Their API is ridiculously complicated because it was not originally designed with being easy to remember in mind. So instead of being called method, I believe it's called type. And then I think instead of being called content type, it's called like data type or something. I have my own little wrapper around this that I use because I don't like calling things by names that they aren't.
You don't have a strong opinion on that, do you?
Yeah, I do. I do. Okay, let's see if this will work. Cool, it does. So, let's see, this will give me, yeah, great. So this is the request that I just made. And you can see it was a get. And then here's like a common type of request that you might use if you were sending data. And let me see if I can remember.
I knew the answer was 42.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully this works the way I think it should. Oh, sweet, I got it right.
Miracles do happen.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the same thing, but I did a post. And so you can see that the headers changed to post, and then this is the data that the server would see. So in your application, you would be getting something like body or form or something like that, and then you would have this object structure with a foo and an answer. But so that's how you, if you're using jQuery, how you would change what you're using. And then on your server side, a lot of times you'll have something like route.get and then some URL, or like route.put, depending on how the application framework is set up. Or it could be something a little bit more complicated than that, but so then you would assign some sort of function that then handled the data in the appropriate way. And again, it's completely up to you. Like, a lot of frameworks kind of assist you in being RESTful, but it's nothing that's set in stone. It's a theory, it's an ideology. So, but it's clean and it's nice, and people like it more when you know what it means and they're talking to you, and you know that it means cleanness. So, any questions? Any trolling? Awesome. Yeah. Only Merrick were here.
If only Merrick were here.
Who's that? Here.
It just kind of clicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so I'm Jameson. I work at ITV. Ryan, that tall guy in the pizza box apart, also works at ITV. We're in downtown Provo, just on Center Street. And like AJ said, we make Nintendo TV. That's probably the thing we're the most well known for. It's the TV app that's built into the Wii U. So if you buy a Wii U and you press the TV button, then we come up and it's an app that helps people find what to watch on TV and helps them interact in cool ways once they're watching stuff. And we do everything in JavaScript. We have lots of Node stuff on the server. We use other technologies too, so we're just interested in smart people. You don't have to be an expert in something, but you in JavaScript, but you should be the kind of person that can become an expert in it if you want to. So if you're interested in that, talk to me afterwards, or just send me an email. My email is Jamison, JAMISON @i.tv. So yeah, and then enjoy the